If there's one thing that Nintendo is anal about, it's control. So today we are discussing a problem that's been plaguing Nintendo for years now, and that is game leaks. Over the lifespan of the Nintendo Switch, we've seen countless major titles leak online well before their official release date. But now that we have official confirmation that new Nintendo hardware is going to be right around the corner, the big question is, can Nintendo finally put an end to this issue? To better understand, let's look at the history of the leaks. Nintendo has always been a target for leaks, but it feels like the problem escalated with the Switch. Let's take a walk down memory lane and revisit one of the most notable leaks during the Switch's lifespan. Right out of the gate, Nintendo's most anticipated game in years, The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, leaked online. Images and gameplay footage leaked online about a week before the official release, and of course Nintendo was probably not thrilled about this happening, but there was also another group out there pretty upset with this as well, and that was the fans. Now, I'm not going to generalize everybody in the same group, but different people are more sensitive towards leaks, I guess you could say, and spoilers specifically. But especially in this case, this dampened the surprise for many fans who were eagerly waiting to experience the open world Hyrule firsthand. I know for me, depending on the game, I'll just strictly avoid social media as a whole, or, I'll scroll with the most extreme caution I can possibly put on myself. But that's mostly when I know the game is going to be very heavily story based. And not every game is going to be, a huge story-driven experience. Like for instance, I'm fairly sure the only people upset when Nintendo Switch Sports leaked out was probably Nintendo themselves. But this begs the question, how do leaks happen in the first place, you ask yourself? Through several sources, I reply to you. There are many steps involved in launching their games, but the downside to that is with each extra step, you introduce one or many other people into the mix, and of course, the more people involved, the larger the room for error. The first layer to this leaking onion is insiders and employees. Now, before you go in the comments and tell me, but employees sign an NDA, they aren't allowed to talk about this stuff. Now, believe it or not, humans do this really weird thing called lying. So yes, they agreed to not speak about anything to anyone, but it doesn't mean they aren't going to do it either way. I'm not saying it's ethical of course, but at the end of the day, they didn't cut off their tongue and offer it to Nintendo, they just signed a piece of paper. And even the insiders that are very careful with who they say things to, it can still get out there. As an example, look at PRO, a very popular Nintendo leaker that is known for having an almost near perfect track record. Although they only leak out the existence of games and not the game itself, you aren't necessarily going to get a near perfect track record by simply guessing. They clearly have an ear on the inside for them. But although the insiders are a logical source for these leaks, realistically this isn't the main source, I'd say. Next, we have retailers and distribution channels. One of the most common sources of leaks is retailers because physical copies of games are often shipped to stores days or even weeks in advance to ensure that they are available on release day. But sometimes these stores just break the street date and sell the copies early. And additionally, employees might sneak out copies or provide details to friends online and on forums, which of course leads to early leaks. Other factors could include third-party partners that may slip up somewhere along the line depending on their involvement. But now comes in the question, what can even be done about this? But before diving into that, I have a very short message. If this is your first time here, hey, my name's Akadrian and I post weekly Nintendo videos. So if that's something you like, I'd very much appreciate it if you would consider liking and subscribing, and without further ado, let's go right back into the video. Although the games leak early for almost every single one of their launches, so it doesn't feel like it would be the case, but Nintendo hasn't been sitting idly. They've taken legal action against many emulators and made them shut down. But not all emulators of course, but mainly the ones that were emulating Switch games early or Switch games at all. But is this really enough to help the situation? What else could they do? Well, if one of the issues is places like Walmart breaking street date and selling the games early or people sneaking out with the copies, what you could do is potentially just send them a little bit later so that there's less of a time frame that the games are just sitting there. Another thing they could try is limiting physical pre-orders to in-store only. If this would be the case, there's no way that a distributor could accidentally send it out maybe a bit too early, then it gets to somebody's house a bit early because you can only pick them up in store. On a personal level though, I don't necessarily like this because I am an avid physical collector and I live in a very rural area. For me, the closest Walmart and GameStop is a 1 hour drive one way, so I know it's at least 2 hours of driving every time I want to go pick up a game. Although there's a lot of speculation on this topic, and I don't think nobody actually necessarily knows exactly why they're doing it, there is kind of a situation similar to this happening right now with Paper Mario and the Thousand Year Door pre-orders. What's been happening is that people have been receiving emails that their pre-order for Paper Mario and the Thousand Year Doors have been cancelled. But interestingly enough, it's only in particular circumstances. For example, Amazon cancelled all pre-orders in March, whereas Walmart cancelled all pre-orders stating that Nintendo won't let them sell the game online. But there's even more exceptions to that because it only appears to be happening in the United States. But places like Target and Best Buy and GameStop can still sell the games. Target is sold out, but Best Buy and GameStop, they're still up and you can still pre-order the game. But as I mentioned, there's no explicit reason as to why this is happening, but my only question is, could this possibly be a test? Because interestingly enough, as I mentioned, almost every single Nintendo game ends up leaking out online a bit early. But Paper Mario and the Thousand Year Doors is releasing in 3 days and no leaks have been found yet. The next logical question I suppose would be why only the United States? The way I perceive it is if Nintendo only had to pick one country to run the test on, you want a country that has a high population, which is the United States, but also a country that has a lot of gamers in it, which is also the United States. But yeah, as I mentioned, nobody necessarily knows why, but I really wouldn't be surprised if this is the case why the pre-orders are being cancelled. But in the end, of course Nintendo probably wants these leaks to stop, but realistically, can Nintendo fix this? I think realistically, they can, but the real question becomes, how worth it is it to them? Because it's going to cost a lot of money to fix. At first, it might seem like all they have to do is kind of swap a few things around and try and hope for the best. But for every decision that is made, somebody had to come up with. And most likely these decisions have been a long time in the making, and you have to pay them a salary to do so because, I mean, most people probably aren't going to be volunteering their time at Nintendo. And once they do come up with a plan, it still has to get approved by the higher-ups. And these higher-ups aren't usually available 24/7, so it becomes a whole process and it takes a lot of time, and like I said, time is money. So it's going to be interesting to see moving into this new hardware generation if Nintendo actually puts an emphasis and prioritizes these game leaks. Now is the part I turn to you. Let me know in the comments, do you think Nintendo will be better with the leaks with the next generation hardware? If you made it all the way up to this point, thank you very much for watching, and hopefully you would please consider liking and subscribing, and until next time, Wadao!